My plan had been simple. Put up a barn on land that belonged to me fair and square. She responded by calling the sheriff, convinced a badge and a patrol car would pressure me into tearing it down. Instead, that single decision triggered a chain of events that eventually wiped out her HOA, removed every member of the board, and ruined the reputation she had spent years building. Before we get into what happened, let me know where you're watching from. Leave your country in the comments because I always enjoy seeing just how far these stories travel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Hit that subscribe button because this story only gets more unbelievable from here. My name isn't important. The only thing that matters is a 5-acre property I bought after saving for 12 long years. It was undeveloped agricultural land located beside a neighborhood called Maple Hollow Estates. My parcel wasn't inside that subdivision. I never signed any HOA paperwork, never agreed to their rules, and never paid a single penny in HOA dues. My land had its own deed, its own agricultural zoning, and was completely separate from everything they controlled. What nobody warns you about when you buy property next to an HOA is that some boards begin believing their authority extends well beyond the lines shown on a survey. One board member in particular, I'll call her Karen because the name fits perfectly, decided that my land was somehow her concern. At the time, I had no idea that the day construction started on my barn was also the day I unknowingly began a battle I was always going to win. I'd imagined building that barn for years. It wasn't going to be some cheap storage shed. I wanted a solid, well-built structure where I could keep equipment, shelter livestock, and eventually convert part of the space into a workshop. Before lifting a single board, I obtained every required permit from the county, not from the HOA, because once again, I wasn't part of their association. Every permit was approved. Every inspection was scheduled. Everything I was doing complied fully with county regulations. Construction went smoothly during the first several weeks. The concrete footings were poured. The framing took shape, and every evening after work I'd stand there for a while, admiring how the project was coming together. Then one afternoon, a woman wearing a visor and oversized sunglasses drove her golf cart straight to the edge of my property. She didn't bother introducing herself. She simply pointed at the unfinished barn and declared, "You need to stop building immediately. That structure violates our community's appearance standards." I calmly explained that I wasn't a member of her HOA. My property wasn't located inside the subdivision, so none of their rules applied to me. She smiled, but there wasn't a trace of kindness behind it. "We'll see about that," she replied before speeding away in her golf cart. At that moment, I had absolutely no idea what kind of mess I had just stepped into. 3 days later, an official-looking envelope arrived in my mailbox. It carried the HOA's letterhead and contained a violation notice threatening me with a £500 per day fine for constructing an unauthorized building that supposedly failed to meet community standards. I actually laughed. I wasn't even one of their members. I called the HOA management office, expecting someone to admit there had been a mistake. Instead, I got a lecture from Karen herself. As it turned out, she wasn't just another resident. She was the president of the HOA board. Karen insisted my land had somehow been informally absorbed into the HOA's authority years earlier. According to her, I now owed years of unpaid dues, accumulated fines, and additional administrative fees. I asked her to provide documents proving any of that. She couldn't. Over the next 2 weeks, more violation letters arrived. Then the phone call started. Soon after that, Karen began showing up in person, parking her golf cart near my property while taking photographs of my barn. She also filled the neighborhood Facebook group with posts about me, encouraging residents to sign a petition demanding that I stop construction on what she called an eyesore that would destroy property values. I kept right on building. At the same time, I carefully saved every letter, logged every phone call, and archived every unhinged social media comment she posted. Something told me I was going to need every piece of that evidence. The day I finally finished the barn, I opened the large double doors and stood there admiring the completed building. That's when I heard tires crunch across the gravel. A sheriff's patrol vehicle pulled into my driveway. Karen had called 911, claiming I had built an illegal structure and accusing me of trespassing on land she insisted belonged under the HOA. She even told dispatch I was violating a court order that supposedly existed. There wasn't any court order. There never had been. The deputy who stepped out looked tired before he even spoke, as though he already suspected this would turn out to be another pointless complaint. I calmly walked him through everything. I showed him my property deed, my county-issued permits, and every inspection record. I'd already arranged the documents neatly across a folding table because I'd been expecting something like this sooner or later. A few moments later, Karen rolled up in her golf cart, practically shaking with anger and talking before she had even stopped. She accused me of keeping illegal livestock and secretly operating an unlicensed business from the barn. Neither accusation was remotely true. The deputy reviewed my paperwork, opened the county zoning maps on his laptop, compared everything carefully, and then turned toward Karen. What he said next would change everything. "Ma'am," the deputy said calmly, "this property is not inside your HOA's jurisdiction. Everything he's built is completely legal, and he hasn't violated any law. What you do need to worry about is continuing to file false police reports." The color drained from Karen's face. For the first time since I'd met her, she didn't argue. She didn't interrupt. She didn't have a single word to say. That silence, however, was only temporary. What happened next would be far more devastating than anything she could have imagined. The truth was, I hadn't been keeping her letters simply as souvenirs of her harassment. The moment those threatening notices started arriving, I hired an attorney who specialized in land use law. Something about Karen's confidence never felt normal. She acted as though she genuinely believed she possessed legal authority over property that wasn't hers to regulate. My lawyer began examining every governing document connected to the HOA. What he uncovered was explosive. Several years earlier, while Karen was serving as board president, the HOA had attempted to expand its boundaries by absorbing neighboring parcels, including my 5 acres, without following a single requirement under state annexation laws. There had been no homeowner vote, no proper public notice, no recorded amendment filed with the county. Legally, the entire annexation attempt was worthless from the beginning, but the deeper we looked, the worse it became. Karen and the board had relied on that unlawful expansion to collect dues from at least 6 other property owners who, just like me, had never legally belonged to the HOA. She hadn't simply targeted me. She had spent years enforcing rules over land she had no authority to control, while collecting money she was never entitled to receive. The moment our attorney submitted those findings to the state attorney general's office, the situation stopped being a disagreement between neighbors. It became a full-scale legal investigation, and there was no stopping it. News travels quickly in a small community. Once the other affected property owners learned what had happened, they realized they had been victims too. Instead of staying silent, 5 of them joined the complaint. Before long, the case evolved into a class action lawsuit. State investigators uncovered years of financial mismanagement during Karen's time as president. They found HOA dues collected from people who were never members, violation fines issued without any legal authority. Administrative charges were thousands of pounds that couldn't be traced anywhere in the association's official financial records. The investigation painted a picture of an organization operating far outside the law. The HOA was ordered to repay every pound it had improperly collected. Karen was immediately removed from the board, but even that wasn't the end. The financial misconduct was so extensive that the association's legal standing itself came under review in court. Exactly 6 months after the sheriff had driven up my driveway, a judge issued the final ruling. The HOA was officially dissolved. Just like that, the organization Karen had used for years to intimidate and control her neighbors no longer existed. The mandatory dues disappeared. The endless violation letters stopped. The surprise visits from an angry woman driving a golf cart became nothing more than a memory. Not long afterwards, I heard Karen packed up and moved to another state. Apparently, she couldn't bear living in a neighborhood where everyone finally knew what she'd been doing behind the scenes. As for me, my barn is still standing today. It's fully permitted. It's completely legal. And it's sitting exactly where it has always belonged, on my own land. Looking back now, it's amazing to think that one false report to the sheriff wasn't simply another act of harassment. It became the spark that destroyed the very HOA Karen believed she controlled forever. Sometimes I wonder how differently everything might have turned out if I'd surrendered that first afternoon. I could have torn down the barn frame. I could have paid the fake fines. I could have let her believe she had won. Instead, I relied on facts. I documented every conversation, every letter, every threat, and every piece of evidence. Then I let the truth do what it does best. If there's one lesson to take away from this story, it's simple. Never allow anyone to intimidate you into giving a property that legally belongs to you, especially when they have absolutely no authority over it in the first place. And believe it or not, this still isn't the wildest HOA story I've ever come across. Next, I'll tell you about a family whose HOA sued them over the color of their front door, only for that lawsuit to end with the family becoming owners of the entire neighborhood's common area. Trust me, you won't believe how that one ends. Make sure you subscribe, because that story is coming next.